Welcome back to another installment of r/no sleep. What we have today, the third installment. Not one, not two, but three. Third installment. Everyone in my town is disappearing. They call it Sulaaphoria. By unreal phenomenon. Let's dig back into it. I've been waiting. I surface from unconsciousness in a blind panic, my limbs lashing out, my breath sharp as a blade. My scream ratcheted off the monastery walls, swallowed by the cavernous silence that followed. But it was not Father Gratian who had woken me. A small group stood at a cautious distance. A fragile old woman, a man close to my age, and a little girl who pressed herself behind others, her small hands clutched at fabric, knuckles white. The man spoke first. "I'm Xavier." His voice was flat, distant. "We found you here, and there's no one else left." The girl peered at me, her eyes glassy, uncertain. I swallowed hard, my throat raw. Where's Father?" Xavier hesitated. "Gone, I assume, same as the others." His gaze drifted toward the floor. "Scattered piles of cloth, that's all that's left." "Dear," the woman said softly, her voice lined with something knowing. "It's only us now. It pains me to say, but we need to leave this place." I pushed myself upright. My body ached, but it was the hollowness to my chest that made me uneasy. I checked my hand. The gauze wrapped around it was still stiff with blood. I unraveled it, let it drop to the floor. The wound beneath looked ordinary, no different than any other cut. My body felt whole, and yet something had changed. The air was too quiet. The altar stood undisturbed, save for a silk pouch and battered book Father Gratian had thumbed through. "Can we go?" the girl whispered. "I don't like it here." Xavier stepped forward, his tone edged with uncertainty. "Hey, I don't know what happened to you, but everything's falling apart. Everyone is gone. This town is..." "Except for us," the old woman interjected. She glanced at the girl, her smile thin. "I'm too bitter, perhaps, and you're too sweet." The girl's expression faltered. "Then how come Mommy and Daddy..." I couldn't bear it. "I'm not leaving," I snapped. "Not until I figure out what the fuck is happening." My pulse rose in my ears. Something crawled inside of me. The old woman pressed her hands over the girl's ears. I grabbed the book and the pouch from the altar. "They told me I was a seer, a witness, but I don't even know what that means." I loosened the pouch drawstring. Inside, the seeds. Small, black, inert. My fingers moved without thought, sifting through them, rolling their edges against my skin, pressing one between my fingertips harder until I felt the bite of a pinprick, a bead of blood swelling up. A sound bloomed. Not sound voices, the dispersing, the soniferous. Every achieved voice slipped through the air, filling me, drowning me. I dropped the seeds. The whispering ceased. Maggie took a step forward. "Sweetie, call me Magdalene, or Maggie. Was that a seed you were holding?" I hesitated. I wanted to hoard them, to keep them from her. The instinct was sudden, foreign. "Get away from me," I said, recoiling. Maggie laughed, unbothered. Xavier stepped forward, his hands raised, his posture careful, calm me down or block me. I wasn't sure. "You should treat me better, dear," Maggie said, voice light. "I could be useful to you. If nothing else, I've been around longer than most. Have you noticed that?" I watched her. She wore a straw hat and a faded floral shirt, as though she had just left a garden and wandered here by accident. "Then what are they?" I asked. "Scrying seeds, of course." She pointed towards the pods on the altar. "When I was your age, we used them to ask questions. Split one open, count the seeds inside. The number was an answer." I frowned. "Did you ever drink the liquid?" We knew better than that. Then her face paled as the sound came. It started as a low vibration, a pressure against my skull, like fingertips pressing into the soft place between bone and thought. A murmur, just beyond hearing. Too deep to be a voice, too rhythmic to be the wind. It thickened, deepened, layered itself in folds, dragging across the air like wet fabric wrung dry. Beneath it, a churning, the slow, nauseating movement of something vast and unseen, dragging its mass through the world. Then came the buzzing, not like bees, like the spaces between bees, the absence where their bodies should be. the flickering nothingness between their wings, as if the air itself begun to fray. A friction, a shimmer, 1,000 invisible threads snapping, vibrating, twisting themselves into knots. The sound carried weight pressed against my teeth, slotted into my jawbone. The floor trembled in response. Xavier stiffened, his fingers clenched around the ragged scrap of cloth he held, knuckles white. "Grandma, I think they're here." Maggie exhaled, slow, as though she had expected this, as though she had waited for it. "They'll come soon. We need to go." The monastery walls seemed thinner now, stretched to a translucence, as if the stone had been scraped down to its last layer. A crack, distant but inevitable, needled through the silence. The sound slithered towards us, rising in pitch, as though a seam were coming undone. A tearing, a splitting, an unzipping of the air itself. I glanced towards the door. The shadows beyond had begun to curdle, shifting not with movement, but with breath, expanding, contracting, the shape of lungs filled with wet decay. Maggie turned to Xavier, nudging the girl toward him. "Take your sister into the tunnels. We'll follow." Then, to me, she said, "Jessica, it's clear your parents cared for you enough to exonerate you from the hell of Sulaaphoria. Do not spit on their graves. Those seeds were knit into your palm to save you. That is how I save my grandchildren." Her face went grave. "But now you are vulnerable again. You hear it though, don't you? Sulaaphoria is coming." Behind us, the air thickened into a pulpy mass. Deep heat curling along the edges of my skin. The monastery swayed, not physically, not in a way I could see, but in a way I could feel, as though the entire structure had become a slow, breathing thing, inhaling into its chest. My skin felt moist. Maggie studied me, then nodded toward the book and pouch in my hands. "Bring them. I have answers for you. Some, quickly now." The sound inched closer, the air growing viscous, filling my throat, clogging the space between each heartbeat. I followed her. I don't know if I had a choice. The monastery groaned around us, mist thickening around its frame, settling in its joints, unspooling from its seams. The structure still stood, but wrong, blurred, its foundation slack. Its dissolution seemed inevitable, as though the monastery had always been waiting to unmake itself. Ahead, the tunnel gaped open, black and waiting. Cold air poured from its mouth, heavy with the smell of old water and the leavings of things that had long since rotted away. It did not feel like a passage. It felt like an esophagus, slick-walled, pulsing, waiting to constrict. Maggie stepped inside without hesitation. I lingered. If I went down, I would leave the town behind, not just physically, not just in distance. I would cross a threshold that could not be undone. The people I had known, the rituals I had been raised on, the way we spoke of life and death, gone. I thought of Arcadie's empty collar, of my father dissolving into the mist off the boat, my mother wicking into the heat of a shower, of Melody's voice, a spatter against porcelain. The earth quivered beneath my feet. Not just the earth, the air, the space itself, a tension stretching thin. The sound behind us moved closer, many noises layered on top of one another, folding and unfolding like water heaving against itself, a tide with no shore. It had no beginning, no source, no single mouth from which it was uttered. It sloshed in thick reverberations, nestling into the nodules of my spine like fingertips slipping into wet clay. Maggie didn't look back. I clenched my fist, the pouch of seeds pressing into my palm. For the first time, I felt relief, or something shaped like it. I stepped forward, and the dark took me whole. The tunnel pressed in around us. The walls were damp and pulsed faintly, threaded with veins of exposed root and rock. The air thickened as we descended, each breath clogging my throat, each footstep muffled by the dense, packed soil. The deeper we went, the heavier the dark became. We walked without speaking. The air behind us still shifted and whispered. Not the groaning of wood or the settling of stone, but the sound that suggested movement, not ours. It curled down into the tunnel after us, hesitant at first, then more sure. A slow, deliberate presence. For the first time, I was leaving the town. I would not say I was happy there, but I would not say I had ever been particularly happy either. The days passed in sameness, in rituals that felt inevitable, in quiet expectations of something that had not yet come for me. But here, with these people, in this place, I felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not even relief. Hope. Hope that the dream of my homeworld would end, that whatever weight had held me there, bound me to its rituals, would dissolve as completely as the achieved. Now, it was just us, this small enclave. We would escape, not just from the sound above, the droning thing that sent the earth trembling like a cold, wet dog, but from the whole dream of Sulaaphoria itself. Sulaaphoria means dissolving, means melting, means dispersing into the whole. It's the end of selfhood, not collectivism, not individuality, just nothing. And I was still here. The tunnel stretched endlessly, devouring our footsteps, our breath, our hunger. Maggie's flashlight wavered ahead of us, its dim glow shallowed by the yawning black. Every sound we made, each breath, each muttered whisper, each scrape of a boot against soil expanded outward, twisted back at us in guttural echoes, too warped to be our own. Alara whimpered, clinging to Maggie's arm. "I'm hungry." She wasn't the only one. My own stomach knotted, my limbs felt slow, as though thickened with lead. I thought of the seeds in my pouch, just 3, too few to sustain, too much risk. They would bring only pain, I thought. A tremor shuddered through the tunnel, faint at first, then the sound. Not above anymore, it was on the walls, pressing through the packed earth, threading itself into the roots and veins of the tunnel. A churning, a slow, wet unraveling, the burrowing weight of something's vast shifting behind the skin of the earth. It did not rush, it did not need to. It was moving closer. I swallowed. "Why didn't you bring food?" I asked Maggie, my rough voice. She turned back, momentarily sweeping the flashlight away from the sloping tunnel ahead. For an instant we walked blind. A wall of blackness enveloped us. Then the light returned. "It wasn't my expectation to leave this way," she said. Her voice was thinner than before, frayed at the edges. "This town is complete. I forgot how quickly it happens upon completion." "I don't want to hear that," Alara muttered, pressing her face against Maggie's side. I tightened my grip on the book. "What does that mean?" Maggie didn't answer right away. Her pace had slowed, her breathing uneven. I had forgotten how easily the elderly wore down. There had been so few of them in this town by design, I suspected. She wiped the sweat from her brow. "Oh, once we're out, you can read about it in that nice new book of yours." Her breath came too quick, too shallow. The sound behind us had grown stronger. I had the sense that if I turned around, I would not see anything. Not a thing to run from. Not a thing to fight. Only the suggestion of presence. The soft shimmer of space thinning at the edges. The moment before a structure folds inward. "We're near the seed bank," Xavier said. He studied a ratty scrap of cloth, its surface webbed with ink lines. A map. His fingers twitched at the edges, holding it too tightly. "From there, we're almost out." Something shifted behind us. A pressure. A weight against the air. No chase, no urgency, only the certainty that it was coming and that it would not stop. Yeah, I'm digging it. Definitely digging it, man. I didn't realize it was going to be multiple series. Man, it's good. I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see what they're going through right now. Thanks for all you out there listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please click the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you. So does Vito. He's snoring right now. Until next time, I am the Meat Grin Masochist. Farewell.